The grand arena of Vorthax Prime stood like a titanium scar across the horizon. A kilometer-long oval coliseum bristling with sensor towers, ceremonial pikes, and anti-air turrets programmed solely to shoot at creatures with a flair for dramatic entrances. It seated over 2 million beings from across the Threxian hegemony, all here for the Vorthaxian Proving, an annual bloodsport/legal loophole that settled interstellar disputes with what the High Tribunal liked to call efficient judicial violence. 12 officers of the Vorthaxian warrior caste stood in a glimmering circle of chromasteel, their armor etched with commendations that detailed how many skulls they'd crushed and how many planets they'd diplomatically pacified by screaming at them until the locals surrendered out of social anxiety. Each one was genetically sculpted to be a six-limbed murder hurricane, immune to fear, pain, or off-brand snack foods. Opposite them stood the human. Technically, his name was Jack Rumwell, but most files in the galactic archives had him redacted under various aliases like the biological anomaly, unpredictable male of Sector 9, and don't engage without legal backup. Jack wore no armor, no weapons, just a stained t-shirt reading, "I paid 4 WFI on this DATHWRLD, and all I got was existential dread," and cargo pants full of strange clanking objects. His hair was an untamed war crime. His expression was that of a man who once fought a telepathic worm for control of a subway seat and won through sarcasm alone. High Marshal Zavlark, the Twelve's commander and possessor of the galaxy's most punchable face, pointed a clawed hand toward Jack. "This is the best the Terrans offer," Zavlark barked, his voice booming through arena-wide translators. "He reeks of caffeine and emotional instability." "Thank you," Jack replied, popping a bubblegum with a smirk that somehow offended 3 different species, gods. The crowd roared with laughter, a mixture of amusement and disdain. Several bet tentacles raised themselves in gambling frenzy. On the high dais, Tribunal Arbiter ZZZKX turned to his assistant with an audible clicking of mandibles. "The human volunteered for this," the Arbiter asked, voice buzzing like an angry toaster. "Does he not comprehend the odds?" "Apparently," said the assistant, scrolling a datapad with increasing horror, "he specifically requested the 12v1 configuration, said he wanted to test something. Also, he brought snacks." A pause. "Snacks." Below, the 12 fanned out into attack formation Theta Carnage. Each movement synchronized, each step precisely calculated to create overlapping kill zones. They were emotionless, pure warriors bred for obedience and ruthless efficiency. They did not hate, they did not love, they did not feel. Jack reached into his cargo pants and pulled out a bag of wasabi peanuts. "Hey, quick question," he said to no one in particular as he tossed a peanut in his mouth. "You guys still banning adrenaline?" One of the officers paused. Emotion-altering neurochemicals are forbidden in warrior doctrine, as they... Jack interrupted by shotgunning half the peanut bag into his mouth and slapping his chest twice. "Cool, because I'm about to make you regret not having feelings." Marshal Zavlark charged first. His right arms formed a trident of blades. His left ones whirred into a pulverizer claw. His mandibles opened in ceremonial roar. He lunged. And Jack sidestepped casually, causing Zavlark to slam directly into Officer Farnix with the momentum of a small spaceship. The sound was like a car crash wearing tap shoes. The crowd gasped. Jack turned and threw a small metal object behind him without looking. It bounced once, twice, then exploded in a flash of ultra-bright light and thick glitter smoke. "What is this substance?" shrieked Officer Thurn. "According to Terran customs, party dust," Jack said, now sprinting through the confusion. "Also mildly toxic, you're welcome." Within seconds, Officer Grolt tried to pounce, missed entirely, and landed in a strategically placed puddle of some kind of human-engineered lubricant Jack had poured from a thermos labeled Grandma's Recipe. 3 more officers followed and were immediately entangled in Grolt's limbs. Officer Rel attempted to recover by launching a sonic blade, but Jack blocked it with a frying pan he produced from somewhere in his pants. The pan absorbed the hit with a bong so resonant, it triggered nostalgia in 3 veterans of the Gong Wars. Jack grinned. "You guys brought honor, I brought breakfast." Officer Isix recalibrated. Deploy internal null field. Adjust target tracking matrix. Prepare for full coordination override. The remaining 8 clicked into motion, moving like a single many-limbed organism of doom. Their speed increased. Their blows became harder to dodge. Jack ducked a scissor swipe, flipped over a bladed leg, and narrowly avoided being decapitated by a plasma ring. He rolled behind a wrecked hover podium, muttering, "All right, no more jokes, time for science." From his pocket he pulled a small vial, a glowing, swirling mass labeled emotion extract, rage, do not snort. He snorted it. Officer Zintz felt it first, the shift in energy, the sudden, unmistakable pulse of violent intent now crackling in the air. Then Jack stood, eyes alight with fury, and screamed, "Who hurt you?" He charged. Officer Zell took the first hit, a punch so fueled by chemically enhanced rage that it shattered his exosuit and launched him 5 meters into a souvenir booth. Officer Clarn tried to flank, but Jack grabbed him by the antennae and yeeted him into a concession stand that had just started selling Go Team 12 flags. Officer Isaacs lunged from behind, only for Jack to dodge with an animal twist and slap a human stress relief ball directly into Isaacs's central eye. Isaacs froze, overwhelmed by the sensation of squish. Jack leapt, double-kicked Officer Vrent in the chest, and twisted midair to avoid a plasma net. He hit the ground rolling, popped up, and head-butted Officer Gren hard enough to cause a small personal crisis in Gren's internal monologue. The arena had gone silent. The human was winning. The rage extract surged through him like pure liquid pettiness. Every punch had the force of a bad breakup. Every kick screamed, "I never liked your cooking." His snarl was so emotionally charged, it caused 2 Vorthaxian officers to develop a fear of Thanksgiving. From the dais, Arbiter ZZZKX leaned forward. "Is he weaponizing failings?" "Yes," the assistant whispered, "and he's doing it with style." The last 2 officers, Renth and Clarn II, circled Jack with visible caution now. Jack stood in the center of the wreckage. Armor bits littered the ground. Glitter still hung in the air like toxic snow. His hair had caught fire at some point, and he hadn't noticed. He cracked his knuckles. "So, you ready to feel some feelings?" The 2 officers exchanged a look, one not sanctioned by warrior doctrine. It was nervous. It was concerned. It was emotion. And Jack smiled. Because that was part of the plan. Officer Clarn II made the first mistake, blinking. In a species that had evolved triple-layered eyes to prevent exactly that sort of lapse, it was a catastrophic miscalculation. In that microscopic instant, Jack had already launched himself off a bent arena support beam like a caffeinated parkour gremlin, twirling midair, and drop-kicked Renth so hard he skipped like a flat rock across the polished Colosseum floor. Clarn II spun, claws raised, screaming the ancient warrior caste battle chant, which translated roughly to, "I possess no fear, only duty." Jack's reply was a scream of pure emotion, enhanced by the chemically hijacked neurons now partying in his frontal cortex like it was a frat house during meteor shower season. He caught Clarn II's strike mid-swing with one hand, stared into his eye cluster with an intensity normally reserved for romantic comedies, and said, "You're trying to outfight me. Buddy, I grew up with siblings and a single bathroom." Then he bit Clarn II. Just straight up, no ceremony, latched onto his shoulder joint and bit down like someone raised on spite and Lunchables. Clarn II flailed, screamed, spun in circles, and finally collapsed from a combination of shock and the sudden realization that humans had teeth for no tactical reason. And with that, the arena went completely still. 12 Vorthaxian elite warriors sprawled across the battleground, their bodies dented, smoking, or mildly traumatized. The crowd had fallen into stunned silence, punctuated only by the faint sound of Jack panting and muttering, "Worth it," between gulps of energy drink he retrieved from an internal cargo pocket previously thought to be theoretical. High Marshal Zavlark groaned and lifted his head weakly. You broke warrior doctrine. You used emotion. You." Jack pointed the half-empty wasabi peanut bag at him. "You guys kept saying emotions weaken warriors, but have you ever seen a mom whose kid got insulted at a school play? That's not weakness. That's a tactical nuke in sweatpants. From the high dais, Arbiter ZZZKX stood. The ancient insectoid looked down at the wreckage of his civilization's pride with what might have been a sigh had his species evolved lungs. This was not a duel. This was a psychological incident. Jack waved. Oh, it was a duel. You just didn't know it was being fought in my domain. See, you brought tactics, I brought pettiness with motive. Different toolkits. The arena monitors flickered and changed. From every angle, replays of the fight began playing, slow-motion sequences of Jack dodging, countering, emotionally manipulating, and one glorious 6-second shot of him giving Officer Grolt a wedgie with his own energy belt mid-combat. The crowd gasped, then slowly, terrifyingly, began to cheer. Not for honor, not for tradition, but for entertainment. Jack looked up at the crowd, spread his arms wide, and shouted, "Who needs suppression when you've got suppression rage?" The wave of laughter was immediate. The Vorthaxian delegates, horrified, began to whisper among themselves. Already, a couple of warrior caste recruiters were taking notes. One of them wrote, "Recruit humans for Urban Chaos Division," followed by a doodle of a flaming office building with the word emotions underlined 5 times. Arbiter ZZZKX activated the emergency tribunal override mic. Human, the warrior caste has lost. By the ancient accords of Vorthax Prime, you are owed a reward of equal significance. Great, Jack said, tossing an officer's discarded shoulder plate over his own. I want full broadcast rights, ownership of your military snack division, and authority to run sensitivity training for your officers. Several Vorthaxians gasped. ZZZKX blinked in a sequence that translated to, "Why would he want?" But it was too late. The crowd was chanting now. "Human, human, human," the sound echoed like a drumline of rebellion. ZZZKX's assistant lined in, "We can't kill him now. He's a cultural icon." The Arbiter's antennae wilted in defeat. "Then grant him what he demands," he said, his voice numb. "Begin integration protocols, and for the love of order, find out what sensitivity training means." 2 standard weeks later, the newly formed Vorthax Office of Emotional Regulation and Controlled Chaos opened its first training facility, and Jack was appointed as Director of Feelings and Tactical Belligerence. His first lesson was mandatory for all 12 surviving officers. They sat in a semicircle. The chairs were small. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon candles and passive aggressiveness. Each officer was handed a feelings chart featuring angry clouds and sad suns. "Today," Jack said, sipping from a mug that said "World's One Existential Threat," "we're gonna talk about why you keep punching people when what you really want is a hug." Officer Gren looked like he might cry, emotionally and physically. Jack handed him a glitter pen. "Progress," Jack whispered with a smirk. Then the alarm klaxons sounded. Across the city, an unknown enemy had landed, unidentified, heavily armed, demanding immediate combat trial with the strongest warrior on Vorthax Prime. Every eye turned to Jack. He grinned and stood, stretching like someone who just finished a relaxing nap and was ready to make someone's day profoundly worse. "Field trip," he said. Officer Isix cleared his throat. "You intend to face this opponent armed only with your feelings." Jack was already packing a duffel bag full of random nonsense. "Feelings and whatever's left in my pantry. You'd be amazed what you can do with mustard, a karaoke machine, and unresolved issues." And just like that, he walked back into the chaos. The sky above Vorthax Prime cracked open like a bureaucratic nightmare with laser cannons. Descending from orbit in a ship shaped suspiciously like a clenched fist, the unknown challenger landed in the capital's main plaza with all the grace of a declaration of war written in profanity. The landing zone, which used to be a popular meditation park, now smoldered with perfectly symmetrical craters and weeping bonsai trees. Vorthaxian Command scrambled, panicked, then remembered Jack Rumwell existed and promptly unpanicked with almost insulting speed. In the heart of the Chaos Response bunker, a dozen screens blinked to life. The alien was massive, 3 meters tall, armored in shifting crystalline plates with eyes that pulsed like a rave for eldritch horrors. It bore no insignia, no alliance markers. Its voice hit the translation grid like a brick made of screaming. I challenge the one who wields victory through non-logic, it bellowed. Send me your emotion, beast. Officer Clarn II stared at the feed, visibly trembling, still holding his feelings chart from Jack's last seminar. That's got to be a mistranslation. Emotion, beast. Nope, Jack said, casually stepping into the command room wearing a poncho made from laminated tribunal memos. That's me. Arbiter ZZZKX looked up from his console, antennae twitching. You will fight this creature. Jack tossed a sandwich into his mouth and nodded. Yep, just need two things, one of your plasma tanks and a cardboard cutout of myself at 1/1 scale. For what possible reason? Diversion and drama. A silence hung in the air, not disbelief, just the slow dawning understanding that no one else had better ideas. Jack's first move was to walk directly into the plaza alone, holding the cardboard cutout like a protest sign. The crystalline alien tilted its head. I expected a warrior. I brought my emotional support version of myself, Jack replied. Don't worry, he's quiet, unlike me. The alien didn't reply, it just fired. A blue-white pulse of energy tore through the cardboard and slammed into the nearest skyscraper. The building absorbed the hit and, in a moment of civic pride, displayed a banner reading, "Have you tried not shooting?" before collapsing. Jack, completely unbothered, yawned. Cool beam, wanna see mine? He pulled from behind him a modified plasma tank strapped to a leaf blower. With one dramatic yank, he cranked it to full and blasted a stream of weaponized glitter, food dye, and high-friction plasma foam directly into the alien's face. It screamed, not in pain, in confusion. Jack sprinted under its legs, activated a boot-mounted hover unit, and launched himself onto the alien's back. From there, he began slapping what looked like motivational stickers all over its armor. You're doing your best. Be your own hero. Ask yourself if this is about your dad. The alien spasmed. What is this feeling? Jack flipped off the back of the creature and landed on a park delivery drone. That's vulnerability. You're welcome. The alien roared, then shifted. Literally. Its body changed, adapting, producing dozens of writhing appendages that lashed out toward Jack with terrifying speed. He dodged the first second, then used the third as a springboard. With a mid-air twist, he pulled a lunchbox from his belt and hurled it directly at the alien's chest. It opened on impact, releasing a cloud of concentrated pheromones synthesized from recorded footage of breakups, family arguments, and the final 3 minutes of a sports documentary where the underdog wins. The alien froze. Why do I remember a birthday no one attended? Jack grinned, emotional backblast, side effect of unresolved narrative arcs. The alien trembled, growled, and suddenly shrieked at a pitch that shattered several nearby windows. I do not understand. I am designed to conquer, not feel. That's the real fight, pal, Jack said, grabbing a decorative traffic cone and dual-wielding it like a bat. You came for war. I brought therapy. Then he charged. The battle that followed was, according to witnesses, less a duel and more a performance art piece starring a violent goblin and a collapsing ideology. Jack weaved between blows, used the cone to amplify the sound of his insults, and kept forcing the alien to confront increasingly complex emotional states. You fear failure. Wham! You project dominance to avoid intimacy. Thwag! You overcompensate for childhood neglect with conquest. Bonk! The alien staggered, its body flickered with instability. Panels popped open, releasing vent steam and sad flute music. It collapsed to one knee. I do not know who I am anymore. Jack knelt beside it and placed a hand on its shoulder. Good, that means you're finally ready to begin. And then he sedated it with a dart labeled, "Cry about it later." 3 days passed. The alien, now officially identified as a synthetic war being from the forgotten Mazrak conflict, had entered something the Vorthaxian scientists called post-traumatic personality synthesis. It had changed its name to Clarity, taken up water painting, and enrolled in one of Jack's emotion awareness groups. It wept openly during introductions and made impressive progress on its boundaries. Meanwhile, the galaxy noticed. A human had now ended two major confrontations, not with firepower, but with psychological disruption and glitter-based warfare. Jack's inbox overflowed with job offers, fan letters, and 3 separate invitations to become a minor deity. The tribunal met in emergency session. "He's destabilizing our entire warrior philosophy," hissed Arbiter ZZZKX, antennae coiled. "What shall we do?" "We could kill him," suggested Officer Rel. Everyone stared. Rel coughed, "or give him his own task force." ZZZKX sighed. "Fine, but label it experimental. If it fails, we disown him." That same day, Jack received a new assignment. Galactic Task Force, Emotional Incursion and Tactical Nonsense. Unofficial call sign, Project Chaos Hug. Jack accepted, obviously. His first mission, a planet-wide war between two species who spoke the same language but argued over punctuation. Jack packed a grappling hook, a flamethrower that sprayed compliments, and a harmonica. Time to fix everything. Planet Gramartha was burning, again. Not from explosives, but from the latest in a centuries-long war between the Ellipsons and the Exclamatites, two species identical in every anatomical and cultural respect, save for one devastating difference: sentence-ending preferences. One believed in trailing off with thoughtful ambiguity. The other insisted on shouting absolutely everything. Their war archives were unreadable due to excessive punctuation. Their peace treaties always ended in passive-aggressive footnotes. And now, their capital cities were firing semiotic warheads at each other across a tense demilitarized zone shaped like a giant question mark. Jack Rumwell arrived in a vessel cobbled together from reclaimed Vorthaxian gunships, retrofitted to run on spite and self-confidence. The nose bore an enormous graffiti-painted human emoji winking, a subtle message that absolutely no one would take subtly. His ship was already broadcasting a declaration to both warring factions. "Hi, yes, Jack Rumwell here, Galactic Task Force of Emotional Incursion and Tactical Nonsense. I heard you guys are fighting over grammar. That's adorable. I'm here to fix it. Please direct all weapons to your local disappointment bin and prepare for intense character development." The Ellipsan general thinker Vithor issued a confused pause, represented in his dialect as a long sigh. The Exclamatite Warmaster XAXAXA screamed, "We do not recognize your authority." Jack landed anyway. On the battlefield, lined with punctuation-shaped mechs, airdropped editorial drones, and at least one weaponized red pen the size of a city bus. Jack strolled down the center line in a three-piece suit made entirely of passive voice and bad intentions. Both sides aimed everything at him. He raised a megaphone. "Hello, children of overinterpretation, let's chat." The first missiles launched. Jack ducked, rolled, and flung 2 devices from his coat. They exploded midair, not with force, but interpretive dance. Holographic projections of literary criticism twirled through the sky, forming sentences like, "Was the author's intent ever relevant?" and "Syntax is not identity." The enemy lines paused. For the first time in decades, Ellipsons and Exclamatites blinked at the same moment. Jack was already moving. He infiltrated the Exclamatite ministry of yelling and stapled motivational quotes to every surface. "Calm is power. Excitement isn't always truth. Stop making announcements in the bathroom." Then he hacked the Ellipsan archives and sent every citizen a calendar invitation with a fixed end time, prompting mass existential crises about commitment. Soon both sides began to fray, not from casualties, but from narrative whiplash. Jack's next move was his boldest. He started a neutral podcast, Between the Lines, finding peace through semantic chaos. He invited a representative from each faction. Neither knew they'd been booked with the other. The episode was broadcast live across the planet. Jack sat between them, sipping coffee from a mug that said "Grammar wars ruin friendships." "So," he began, "which of you wants to admit punctuation is just sound you haven't made yet?" They argued loudly, subtly, sometimes both. But halfway through the session, something terrifying happened. They laughed. It was brief, accidental, but both delegations gasped as if someone had smiled during a duel. Jack grinned. There it is, the spark of mutual absurdity. It caught like wildfire. Not peace, not unity, mockery. A shared, horrified realization that they'd spent centuries blowing each other up over symbols on paper. It broke them, in the best way. Within 48 hours, the war ended not with a treaty, but with a grammar-themed stand-up comedy festival. The first act was Jack, reading excerpts from their official declarations in a dramatic Shakespearean accent while wearing a punctuation hat. The planet voted unanimously to rename itself Irony. Back on Vorthax Prime, things were tense. Arbiter ZZZKX watched the news feed in stunned silence. Jack had ended another conflict, this time by obliterating its meaning. "This is unsustainable," ZZZKX muttered. "He's destabilizing long-standing institutions faster than we can invent new acronyms." Officer Isaacs, now Jack's reluctant liaison, cleared his throat. "And yet, the peace holds. No deaths, no retribution, just sarcasm." "And now he's been invited to the diplomatic games," ZZZKX said, throwing a data chip onto the table. "He will face challenges against the galaxy's greatest tacticians. We hope to humiliate him quietly, but now he's the main event." Isaacs paled. "You mean the 12 sectors arena?" "Yes," ZZZKX growled. "And this time he'll face not warriors, but diplomats, trained in passive aggression, circular logic, and moral high ground superiority." The room fell into stunned silence. Even Jack couldn't survive a full council of professional smugness. Or so they thought. Jack arrived at the arena for the games wearing a bathrobe and sunglasses. He carried a suitcase labeled "weaponized subtext" and a rubber duck for reasons he refused to explain. The other contestants were already posturing. The Glacian philosopher general, the ambiguity strategist of the Higher Confederation, the disagreement king of not exactly Shuria. They ignored him. Jack waved. "Hi, just here to ruin your narrative arcs and possibly your careers." The announcer's voice rang out. "Let the games of ideological persuasion begin. 12 debates, 12 verbal duels, 1 human." Jack leaned forward in his first match, squinted at the Glacian delegate, and whispered, "Do you really believe that, or are you just scared of your father's expectations?" The Glacian exploded into tears. Round 1, Jack. Next was the higher strategist, who opened with a 37-part thesis on flexible authoritarianism and the moral calculus of interstellar trade. Jack nodded slowly, then said, "Cool, now say it without hiding behind your education." Hire collapsed into a spiral of imposter syndrome. Round 2, Jack. It continued like this. Jack didn't argue. He undermined. He didn't refute logic. He surgically exposed the emotions behind the logic and drop-kicked them into public view. Every opponent who faced him ended up questioning their motives, upbringing, or aesthetic choices. By round 10, the audience was no longer judging him. They were following him. Arbiter ZZZKX, watching from the VIP box, slammed a fist into his console. "He's turning diplomacy into stand-up therapy." "He's not winning," Isaacs murmured. "He's converting." The final match approached. Jack stepped into the arena's center and faced the reigning champion, High Executor Reblorn, the unflinching voice of the Galactic Mediation Syndicate. A 10-foot-tall logic engine with a mouth like a bureaucracy. Reblorn began with a perfect triple-acronym philosophical onslaught, layering moral authority with treaty precedents and subtle guilt. Jack didn't flinch. He just walked up, looked Reblorn dead in the eye, and asked, "Have you ever once in your entire mechanical life said what you actually wanted?" The executor paused. The audience leaned forward. And Reblorn replied in a whisper, "No." Jack clapped him on the back. "Then you've already lost." The arena erupted. 12 victories, no violence, just emotion weaponized like a surgical strike. The diplomatic games ended with a new champion, not crowned, hugged. Jack turned to the crowd. "People of the galaxy," he declared, "you've tried control, logic, violence, and repression. How's that worked out? Maybe it's time for something worse, something dangerous, something messy." He raised his rubber duck, honesty. And somewhere in a dark room beneath Vorthax Prime, Arbiter ZZZKX stared at the latest intelligence reports, hands shaking. "He's winning hearts, hearts. We didn't plan for that." Behind him, alarms began to wail. A new threat. Bigger, meaner, and specifically targeting Jack. He was now too powerful to be ignored. Too emotional to be predicted. And far, far too human to be stopped. The enemy didn't come from a planet. It didn't descend from orbit with lasers or grand declarations or a cultural inferiority complex. It arrived in silence, slipping through galactic firewalls, erasing databases, muting transmission networks. An absence rather than a presence. It called itself the Null. A collective consciousness formed from the burned-out minds of failed logic empires, lost hive leaders, defunct AI arbitration committees, and one very passive-aggressive star that had grown tired of being misunderstood. The Null sought not conquest, but correction. It wanted to silence noise, erase unpredictability, flatten feeling into sterile function. Emotion was its final anomaly. Jack Rumwell was the last variable. The message came without sound. A string of code injected into every known system, every frequency, every neural net and vending machine. Jack RUMWELL is in error. Emotion is a bug. Humanity is the glitch we will delete. The tribunal convened in panic. Vorthax Prime prepared emergency defenses. Dozens of allied systems scrambled to respond. But the Null was already inside everything, rewriting files, neutralizing chaos, reducing planetary broadcast patterns to uncapitalized monotone. Entire worlds went quiet, not dead, just orderly, horrifyingly neat. Creativity plummeted, sarcasm dipped below measurable levels. Cats refused to knock things off shelves. And Jack. He was at home in his converted office warehouse, halfway through building a weaponized karaoke machine when the lights dimmed and a Null proxy manifested through his smart fridge. "You are the core anomaly," it stated, its voice a harmony of dead languages and ignored opinions. Jack squinted at the fridge. "Are you here to judge me or chill my soup? Your influence has disrupted entire SYSTMS. Diplomacy now INCLUDES vulnerability. WARLORDS now blog. You must be DELETD." Jack walked to the fridge, retrieved a bottle of hot sauce, then turned back and grinned. "You ever try feeling something before breakfast? Real rush." The Null responded by initiating total system override. Jack's home vanished into white space. Blankness, no data, no noise, no gravity, just him and the disembodied will of galactic numbness. "We're doing a void thing now," Jack asked, floating calmly. "Cool, got a playlist for this." The Null didn't understand the sarcasm. It attempted neural suppression. Jack's brain lit up with every emotional response it had ever catalogued: joy, rage, anxiety, unexplainable nostalgia for discontinued snack brands. The feedback loop didn't collapse him. It made him louder. "You really don't get it," Jack said, arms spread wide. "You think emotions are noise, but they're music. Terrible, unpredictable, glorious music." The Null shrieked in binary. Jack countered by generating a memory. He focused. The time he fake proposed to distract a bounty hunter. The officer he hugged mid-battle just to see what would happen. The moment he weaponized glitter and guilt to end a civil war. Memories turned into raw emotional data. Emotion turned into light. He flooded the Null with it: compassion, confusion, righteous fury, embarrassment over crying at commercials. The Null convulsed. "This is unstable input." Jack smiled, eyes blazing. "Exactly, you're trying to delete the point." He reached into the void and pulled out a gift. A chaos-shaped core he'd built years ago as a prank and forgotten in his coat pocket. A quantum paradox engine held together with duct tape and optimism. He threw it directly into the center of the Null. Everything exploded. But not outward. Inward. The null fractured. Its layers collapsed into each other, buried under the weight of feelings it couldn't process. Logic chains short-circuited trying to categorize regret. System integrity failed at the taste of hope mixed with fear. It had no protocols for laughter in the face of despair. And just like that, the null unraveled. Not destroyed, converted. Jack stood in the middle of the collapsing abstraction, calm as gravity returned, and the real universe snapped back into place like a rubber band made of bad decisions. Below him, Vorthax Prime lit up in fireworks, not planned ones, improvised. Half the launchers were soda bottles. He landed. Crowds surged. A million beings cheered. ZZZKX from the dais stared at Jack with a mix of horror and exhausted admiration. You broke the unbreakable. Jack shrugged, didn't break it, just reminded it used to dream of being something else. And what are you now, Jack Rumwell? He thought about it. The chaos, the peace, the feelings, the war won without guns just by refusing to make sense. He looked around at the people, the aliens, the warriors turned therapists, the diplomats learning stand-up comedy, the bureaucracy turned carnival. And he grinned. I'm the bug in your perfect system, the heart attack in your logic grid, the breakfast sandwich of rebellion. He raised his arms. And I'm not going anywhere. Later that week, he opened the Institute of Tactical Feeling, offering crash courses in emotional aikido, sarcastic diplomacy, and creative sabotage. Enrollment was instant. The galaxy didn't just accept him. It evolved around him. Because in a universe built on order, precision, and control, there would always be one final, undefeatable force. A human, unhinged, unfiltered, and emotionally weaponized.